Marcus Reynolds stares at the departures board as every flight status changes to "cancelled" simultaneously. The entire Jetstream Airways terminal erupts in chaos. Marcus's phone rings. "Sir, the board wants an emergency meeting. You can't ground the entire airline fleet." "Watch me," he replies, looking at his devastated twin daughters. Before we dive into this incredible story of power, prejudice, and a father's protective fury, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about people standing up against discrimination in unexpected ways. Isaiah Reynolds didn't set out to become an airline CEO. At 47, the brilliant aerospace engineer had spent most of his career designing aircraft systems that made flying safer and more efficient. His reputation for innovation and unwavering standards had catapulted him from head engineer to chief operations officer and finally to chief executive officer of Jetstream Airways, America's fifth-largest airline, in just 8 years. His corner office on the 35th floor of Jetstream Tower in downtown Atlanta offered a panoramic view of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. On clear days, he could see Jetstream's distinctive blue and silver jets taking off and landing. Each one carried hundreds of passengers who trusted his company with their lives. It was a responsibility Isaiah never took lightly. "Mr. Reynolds, your wife is online too," his assistant Darren announced through the intercom. Isaiah smiled as he picked up the phone. "Hey, gorgeous." "Don't 'hey gorgeous' me," Zoe Reynolds replied, though Isaiah could hear the smile in her voice. "You promised to be home by 7 for the girls' practice session." Zoe Reynolds was a force to be reckoned with in her own right. At 45, she had built a reputation as one of Atlanta's most formidable civil rights attorneys. The daughter of activists who had marched with Dr. King, Zoe had law in her blood and justice in her bones. Her firm specialized in discrimination cases, and she'd won settlements against some of Georgia's most powerful corporations. I know, Isaiah sighed, glancing at his watch. It was already 6:15 p.m. The board meeting ran long. Budget negotiations for the new terminal. "Isaiah, this is important to them. The competition is next week, and they need their father's feedback." The "them" Zoe referred to were their identical twin daughters, Amara and Aaliyah Reynolds. At 17, the girls were their parents' pride and joy, straight-A students at Westlake Preparatory Academy with matching dimples and divergent passions. While they shared an uncanny ability to communicate without words, as many identical twins do, they expressed themselves differently through music. Amara was a gifted violinist, while Aaliyah made the cello sing like a human voice. "I'll be there," Isaiah promised. Nothing's more important than the girls. Their Buckhead home was a showcase of modern architecture nestled among century-old oak trees, 5 bedrooms, a home studio for the twins' practice, and Zoe's carefully curated collection of African-American art. It was far removed from Isaiah's childhood in South Chicago, where his single mother had raised 3 boys in a 2-bedroom apartment. When Isaiah pulled into the driveway that evening, he could already hear the rich harmonies of his daughters practicing. He paused in the foyer, closing his eyes to absorb the music. Amara and Aaliyah were playing a duet they had composed themselves for the Young Artists of America competition in New York, a prestigious event that could lead to Juilliard scholarships for both girls. "You're late," Aaliyah said without missing a note when he entered the studio. "But you're here now," Amara added with a smile that matched her sister's. Despite their identical appearance, both tall and slender with their mother's high cheekbones and their father's thoughtful brown eyes, Isaiah never had trouble telling them apart. Aaliyah carried herself with quiet confidence, while Amara's energy seemed to vibrate just beneath her skin. "That sounded beautiful," Isaiah said, kissing each girl on the forehead. "The judges won't know what hit them." "If we make it to the finals," Aaliyah said, "you'll be there, right? Even though it's on a Thursday?" Isaiah exchanged a glance with Zoe, who had entered behind him. His schedule next week was packed with meetings, including a crucial negotiation with the pilots' union. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," he promised. "I'll fly up that morning." Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Zoe confronted him. You shouldn't have promised that. You know you have the union meeting. Isaiah sighed. I'll reschedule. Roger can handle the initial talks. That's not the point. You're spreading yourself too thin. The girls understand you have responsibilities. Do they? Isaiah asked quietly. Sometimes I feel like I'm missing everything important. Their last recital, Amara's debate championship. You're doing the best you can, Zoe said, softening. We all are. They discussed logistics for the twins' trip. The girls would fly to New York on Tuesday for preliminary rounds, staying with Zoe's college roommate. Isaiah and Zoe would fly separately on Thursday if the twins made the finals, Zoe on a morning flight and Isaiah on an afternoon one after his rescheduled meeting. They're excited about flying alone, Zoe mentioned. Their first trip without us hovering. Isaiah nodded, though a protective instinct made him uneasy. I've arranged for them to use the first-class check-in, but don't tell them. I want them to think they're navigating the regular process, but with a little invisible help. Always the puppet master, Zoe teased, though her expression grew serious. I've already had the talk with them about traveling while black. Keep your IDs accessible. Be polite but firm. Don't give anyone a reason. They shouldn't need a reason, Isaiah said, a familiar frustration rising. Despite his position and wealth, he knew his family wasn't immune to the prejudice that remained embedded in American society. He'd experienced it himself, even in a suit that cost more than some people's monthly salary. They shouldn't, Zoe agreed, but they do. That's the world we're still living in. As they drifted to sleep, Isaiah made a mental note to call the airline the girls would be flying with, not Jetstream, but SkyRoute Airlines, one of their competitors. He knew their CEO, William Anderson, from industry conferences. Perhaps he could ensure his daughters received VIP treatment without them knowing. A quiet courtesy from one executive to another. Little did he know that this simple trip would soon trigger a chain of events that would shake the entire airline industry to its core. The day of the twins' departure dawned bright and clear, a perfect April morning in Atlanta. Sunlight streamed through the blinds in Amara and Aaliyah's shared bedroom as they finished packing their carry-ons. Their larger suitcases, containing their formal performance attire and backup clothing options, had been packed the night before under Zoe's watchful eye. Do you think we need rain jackets? Amara asked, scrolling through the weather forecast on her phone. It says there's a 20% chance of showers in New York on Thursday. Aaliyah zipped her toiletry bag closed and tucked it into a side pocket. Better to have it and not need it, she replied, the more cautious of the two. Besides, April in New York is unpredictable. Their musical instruments would travel with them in the cabin, a non-negotiable point that Isaiah had confirmed multiple times with the airline. The delicate instruments were too valuable, both financially and emotionally, to risk in checked baggage. Zoe appeared in the doorway, already dressed for court in a tailored navy suit. Almost ready. We should leave in 30 minutes to allow plenty of time at the airport. Mom, the flight's not until 11, Amara groaned. It's barely 7. And you'll thank me when you're not rushing through security, Zoe countered. Remember what I told you about traveling? The twins exchanged a knowing look before reciting in unison, always be early. Dress professionally. Keep your IDs visible. Speak clearly and respectfully. Don't argue if questioned. And? Zoe prompted. Document everything if there's a problem, Aaliyah finished. We know, Mom. Zoe's expression softened. I know you know. I just want your trip to be smooth. Left unsaid was the reason for these precautions, the reality that as young black women, they might face scrutiny or suspicion that their white counterparts wouldn't. Isaiah appeared behind Zoe, straightening his tie. Car's packed. I've got a meeting at 8:30, so I'll drop you at the terminal on my way to the office. During breakfast, the conversation flowed easily between music theory and competition strategy, but beneath the normalcy ran an undercurrent of nervous energy. This would be the twins' first time flying without their parents, their first major competition outside the Southeast. Aunt Patricia will meet you at LaGuardia, Zoe reminded them, referring to her college roommate who now worked as a museum curator in Brooklyn. She'll text me when you've arrived safely. Mom, we're 17, not 7, Amara said, though she appreciated the safety net. In the car, Isaiah used the rearview mirror to study his daughters in the back seat. When had they grown into these poised young women? It seemed like yesterday they were toddlers learning to walk, then elementary schoolers picking up their first instruments, and now they were nearly adults on the cusp of college and careers. Dad, you're staring, Aaliyah noted without looking up from her sheet music. Isaiah chuckled. Just memorizing the moment. I'm proud of you both, you know that. No matter what happens at this competition. At the departures level of Hartsfield-Jackson, Isaiah pulled up to the SkyRoute Airlines drop-off area. He helped unload their suitcases and instrument cases, then hugged each daughter tightly. Text when you get to the gate, and again before takeoff, he instructed. And call me tonight from Aunt Patricia's. Yes, sir, Amara said with a playful salute. As they prepared to enter the terminal, Isaiah's phone buzzed with a text from his assistant about the morning's meeting. Distracted, he waved a final goodbye and pulled away from the curb, watching his daughters wheel their luggage through the sliding doors. What Isaiah didn't know as he drove toward downtown was that he had forgotten one crucial detail: the call he'd meant to make to SkyRoute CEO never happened. Between the board meeting and union negotiations, it had slipped his mind entirely. His daughters would be traveling not with VIP treatment, but as ordinary passengers. Inside the terminal, Amara and Aaliyah approached the SkyRoute check-in counter with their IDs and boarding passes preloaded on their phones. Good morning, Aaliyah greeted the agent, a middle-aged woman whose name tag read Linda. We have a flight to LaGuardia at 11. The check-in process went smoothly enough, though Linda seemed to study their IDs longer than she had for the white businessman ahead of them. When she handed back their boarding passes, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Next stop, security, Amara said cheerfully as they walked away. The security checkpoint was where things began to go wrong. The TSA agent examining IDs paused at Aaliyah's driver's license, looking between the photo and her face multiple times. Purpose of your trip to New York, he asked, a question he hadn't posed to the travelers ahead of them. We're participating in a music competition, Aaliyah answered politely. The agent nodded slowly, then scrawled something on Aaliyah's boarding pass before handing it back. As they moved toward the scanner, Amara noticed a small SSSS marked on her sister's document, indicating selection for additional screening. It's random, Aaliyah whispered, seeing Amara's concerned expression. But it didn't feel random when Aaliyah was directed to a separate area after going through the body scanner. Amara watched anxiously as a female TSA officer explained that Aaliyah would need to undergo a pat-down search and have her carry-on items inspected manually. Would you like a private screening room? The officer asked. No, here is fine, Aaliyah replied, remembering her mother's advice to always remain in public view if questioned or searched. The pat-down was thorough and impersonal, but Aaliyah couldn't help feeling humiliated as other travelers glanced curiously in her direction. The officer then began removing items from her carry-on, examining her sheet music, toiletries, and even the novel she'd brought for the flight. What's this? The officer asked, holding up a small wooden box. My rosin for my bow, Aaliyah explained. For my cello. I'm a musician. The officer opened the box, inspected the amber-colored rosin, then swabbed it for explosive residue. The entire process took nearly 20 minutes, during which Amara stood waiting with both instrument cases and her own bag, growing increasingly concerned about the time. When Aaliyah was finally cleared, the sisters hurried toward their gate, checking the time, 10:15 a.m., 45 minutes until boarding. That was ridiculous, Amara muttered. It's fine, Aaliyah replied, though her voice was tight. Let's just get to the gate. As they walked, Isaiah's text message arrived, heading into my meeting. Break a leg at practice tomorrow. Can't wait to see you perform on Thursday. Love you both. With a mixture of determination and trepidation, the twins approached Gate B-23, where SkyRoute Flight 1482 to New York would soon begin boarding. They had no way of knowing that the true ordeal was just beginning. Airline denies twin black girls boarding. Seconds later, CEO dad grounds every flight. Gate B-23 buzzed with pre-boarding activity as Amara and Aaliyah arrived. Passengers clustered around the boarding area, some seated, others standing with luggage at the ready. The gate agent, a blonde woman in her mid-30s with Heather Wilson on her name tag, was already making announcements about the boarding process. "We'll begin boarding our priority passengers in just a few minutes," she announced. "Please have your boarding pass and ID ready." The twins found seats near the gate, carefully positioning their instrument cases between them. Aaliyah was still shaken from the security screening, though she tried not to show it. "You okay?" Amara asked quietly. Aaliyah nodded. "Just ready to get on the plane and put this morning behind us." When priority boarding was called, they remained seated, waiting for their group. Soon enough, Group 2 was announced, and they gathered their belongings to join the line. As they approached the gate agent, Amara noticed Heather's smile falter slightly when she looked up at them. It was a subtle change, but one she'd learned to recognize, that brief recalibration some people made when encountering someone who didn't match their expectations. "Boarding passes and IDs, please," Heather requested, her tone professionally neutral. The twins presented their phones with the digital boarding passes and their driver's licenses. Heather looked at Amara's first, comparing the ID to her face with a quick glance before scanning the boarding pass. When she turned to Aaliyah, however, her examination became more thorough. "These IDs look identical," she remarked, looking between the licenses and the girls. "We're identical twins," Amara explained with a polite smile. Heather's eyes narrowed. "The photos are exactly the same." "No, they're not," Aaliyah said. "They were taken on the same day, but they're different photos." Heather studied the IDs again, then handed them back. "One moment, please." She picked up her phone and pressed a button. "Brandon to Gate B-23, please." "Brandon to B-23. The sisters exchanged concerned glances as Heather asked them to step aside, allowing other passengers to continue boarding. A few minutes later, a man in his 40s with thinning hair and a SkyRoute supervisor badge approached. "What's the issue, Heather?" he asked, not acknowledging the twins. "These two have nearly identical IDs," Heather explained in a lowered voice that was still audible to the sisters. "The photos look the same, the information is almost identical. Something doesn't add up." Brandon Mitchell turned to the twins, his expression already set in disbelief. "May I see your identification, please?" Once again, Amara and Aaliyah presented their driver's licenses. Brandon examined them side by side, his frown deepening. "These look suspicious," he stated. "The photos are too similar." "We're identical twins," Aaliyah repeated, her patience beginning to wear thin. "We got our licenses on the same day. Do you have any other identification?" Brandon asked. Amara reached into her backpack and produced their school IDs. "We also have our birth certificates in our luggage." Brandon examined the school IDs with the same skepticism. "These could be fake as well. We can't risk having unauthorized passengers on our aircraft." A small crowd of onlookers had begun to form, some openly watching the confrontation while others pretended to be occupied with their phones. "What exactly are you implying?" Amara asked, her voice steady despite her rising anger. "I'm not implying anything," Brandon replied. "I'm stating that we can't verify your identities with these documents. They could be forgeries." Aaliyah, usually the calmer of the two, stepped forward. "You're suggesting we forged government IDs to, what? Sneak onto a flight we've already paid for? That's absurd." Amara noticed a white couple roughly their age moving through the boarding line without any similar scrutiny. The contrast was stark and infuriating. "I'm going to call our mother," Amara said, pulling out her phone. "She's an attorney." That won't be necessary, Brandon said dismissively. This isn't a legal matter. It's airline policy regarding identification verification. As Amara dialed Zoe's number, she noticed other passengers whispering and some taking out their phones, likely recording the incident. Aaliyah, meanwhile, had begun recording the interaction herself. "Excuse me," an older white woman in the boarding line called out. "Those girls have been waiting here as long as I have. Why are they being questioned like this?" Brandon ignored the comment, focusing instead on Aaliyah's phone. "Recording is not permitted in the boarding area." "There's no sign stating that," Aaliyah replied calmly. "And since you're accusing us of fraud, I think it's appropriate to document this interaction." By now, the final boarding call for their flight had been announced, and passengers were still streaming past them onto the jetway. "Our mother is on her way," Amara said after ending her call. "She'd like to speak with your manager." "That won't change anything," Heather interjected. "The flight is nearly boarded. Even if we could verify your identities, which we can't right now, you've missed your opportunity. You're the ones who pulled us aside." Aaliyah exclaimed, her composure finally cracking. Brandon's posture stiffened. "If you continue to raise your voice, I'll have to call security." A middle-aged black man in a business suit stepped out of the boarding line. "I'm an attorney," he said, approaching the group. "What seems to be the problem here?" "This doesn't concern you, sir," Brandon replied. "Please board the aircraft or step aside." "It concerns me when I see two young women being discriminated against," the man replied. "I've been watching this entire interaction, and I haven't seen any valid reason to deny them boarding." Brandon's face reddened. "Sir, if you interfere with the boarding process, you'll also be denied boarding." The attorney handed the twins his business card before reluctantly continuing to the jetway, promising to provide his contact information once on board. As the final passengers boarded, Brandon turned to the twins. "I'm sorry, but you will not be boarding this flight. If you'd like to discuss this further, you can speak with customer service about rebooking options." "This is discrimination," Amara stated plainly, still recording. "We have valid tickets and legal identification." "This is a security decision," Brandon countered. "If you don't leave the boarding area now, I will call airport security." The gate door closed behind the final passenger, leaving the twins stranded as their flight prepared for departure. Amara felt a mixture of rage and humiliation burning in her chest. Aaliyah's eyes had welled with tears that she refused to let fall. "Let's go find customer service," Aaliyah said quietly. "Mom will be here soon." As they gathered their belongings, Amara could see their flight through the window, still attached to the jetway. Inside that plane was their path to the competition they'd worked toward for months. All because someone decided their identification looked too similar. "This isn't over," she promised her sister as they walked away from Gate B23, the eyes of remaining gate agents and travelers following them as they left. The SkyRoute Airlines customer service counter stretched across a busy intersection of Terminal B. Behind the counter, 4 agents assisted a growing line of distressed travelers dealing with various problems: missed connections, lost luggage, weather delays. None of these issues, Amara thought bitterly, involved having their identities questioned because of how they looked. After 20 minutes of waiting, the twins reached the counter. A woman with graying hair and a name tag reading Dana Cooper greeted them with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How can I help you today?" she asked, fingers poised over her keyboard. "We were just denied boarding at Gate B23, Aaliyah explained, her voice steady despite her lingering anger. "The gate agents claimed our IDs looked suspicious because we're identical twins." Dana's expression didn't change as she tapped at her computer. "I see your reservation here. Flight 1482 to LaGuardia, which has now departed." She looked up from her screen. "Did the gate agent make notes about why you were denied boarding?" "Because they're racist," Amara said bluntly. "We showed them our driver's licenses and school IDs. They still claimed they couldn't verify our identities." Dana's lips thinned. "I'm sure that's not the case. Our staff is well trained in identification verification. Well trained to do what? Profile passengers. Amara challenged. Aaliyah placed a calming hand on her sister's arm. Our mother is on her way. She's an attorney, and she'd like to speak with a manager about this situation. Dana's professional demeanor cooled several degrees. If you'd like to rebook, I can check availability on later flights. There's a 3:15 p.m. departure with seats available. The change fee would be $200 per passenger. Change fee? Aaliyah echoed incredulously. We didn't choose to miss our flight. Your staff prevented us from boarding. I wasn't at the gate, so I can't comment on what happened there, Dana replied. But our policy is clear regarding change fees. We're not paying any fees, Amara stated firmly. We want to speak to your manager immediately. Dana sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. My supervisor is in a meeting. If you don't wish to rebook now, maybe you should try another airline. The suggestion, that they should simply go elsewhere after being discriminated against, was so dismissive that both sisters were momentarily speechless. At that moment, Zoe Reynolds strode into the terminal, her court heels clicking purposefully against the polished floor. In her charcoal suit and with her leather briefcase, she looked every inch the formidable attorney she was. The twins felt a wave of relief at the sight of her. Mom! Aaliyah called out. Zoe reached them quickly, embracing each daughter before her gaze locked onto Dana. I understand my daughters were denied boarding despite having valid tickets and legal identification. I'd like an explanation. Dana's posture straightened. As I was explaining to the young ladies, I wasn't present at the gate, so I can't comment on the specific circumstances. If they'd like to rebook. I'm not interested in rebooking at this time, Zoe interrupted. I want to speak with the highest-ranking SkyRoute representative at this airport, immediately. I'm afraid that's not possible without an appointment, Dana replied. Then make one, Zoe countered. For right now. As they argued, Amara noticed two airport security officers approaching from the side. One, a stocky white man with a buzz cut whose name badge read, Thomas Reed, had his hand resting casually on his taser. The other, a taller black officer named James Barker, maintained a neutral expression as they drew closer. Is there a problem here? Officer Reed asked, directing his question to Dana rather than the Reynolds family. These customers are upset about missing their flight, Dana explained, her voice carrying a subtle emphasis on the word upset that suggested the family was being unreasonable. We didn't miss our flight, Aaliyah corrected. We were prevented from boarding because the gate agents claimed our IDs were suspicious. Zoe turned to face the officers, her expression composed but determined. I'm Zoe Reynolds, attorney with Morris & Reynolds. My daughters were discriminated against by SkyRoute staff, who denied them boarding despite their having valid identification and tickets. We're requesting to speak with management. Officer Reed's stance shifted subtly. Ma'am, we're just here to make sure everyone stays calm. We are calm, Zoe replied, pulling out her phone. And I'll be recording this interaction from this point forward. Officer Barker nodded slightly. That's your right, ma'am. The situation had begun to attract attention from nearby travelers, some slowing their pace to observe the confrontation. Amara noticed several people had their phones out, likely recording as well. A man in a SkyRoute management uniform approached, his silver hair and confident bearing suggesting authority. His name badge identified him as Gregory Franklin, operations manager. What seems to be the issue here? He asked, his tone suggesting this was a minor matter he could quickly resolve. The issue, Mr. Franklin, Zoe began, is that my daughters were racially profiled, accused of having fraudulent identification, and denied boarding on their flight. All because they're identical twins who happen to be black. Franklin's expression remained neutral. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Reynolds. Attorney Zoe Reynolds. Ms. Reynolds, I assure you that SkyRoute Airlines does not discriminate against passengers. If your daughters were denied boarding, I'm certain our staff had valid concerns about their documentation. What valid concerns could they possibly have had? Zoe challenged. My daughters presented Georgia driver's licenses and school IDs. Perhaps they should have arrived earlier to allow time for proper verification, Franklin suggested, his condescension barely concealed. Our gate agents have to make quick judgments during the boarding process. They arrived with plenty of time, Zoe countered. And those quick judgments seem to disproportionately affect passengers of color. Franklin's expression hardened. I understand you're upset, but I must emphasize that this is not about race. We have protocols for security that apply to all passengers. Then why were white passengers with similar documentation boarding without issue? Amara interjected. Young lady, you can't possibly know what documentation other passengers presented, Franklin replied dismissively. The confrontation was escalating, with more security officers appearing at the periphery of the scene. Travelers had formed a loose semicircle, many openly recording now. Do you find it fair that these young women were denied boarding simply because they're identical twins? Type 1 in the comments if you think the airline was wrong to treat them this way. How would you have reacted in their situation? Hit that like button if you believe we need to keep exposing discrimination like this, and subscribe to see what happens next in this explosive confrontation. Now, the question remains, what will Isaiah do when he discovers what happened to his daughters? Will this powerful CEO father let this injustice stand? And how will the airline respond when they discover who these girls' father is? Stay with us to find out. Isaiah Reynolds sat at the head of the conference table in Jetstream Airways' executive boardroom, surrounded by 12 division heads and vice presidents. Digital screens displayed quarterly financial projections as Chief Financial Officer Roger Williams walked the team through upcoming budget allocations for the new terminal expansion at Denver International Airport. If we accelerate construction on the East Concourse, we could be operational by Q2 next year, Roger was saying. The additional gates would increase our capacity by 17% in the Denver market. Isaiah nodded absently, his mind momentarily drifting to his daughters. They should be at cruising altitude by now, halfway to New York. He made a mental note to text them once the meeting concluded, to make sure they'd arrived safely at their aunt's place. His phone vibrated in his pocket, once, twice, then repeatedly in quick succession. Isaiah frowned. He had a strict policy about silencing devices during meetings, but as CEO, he kept his phone on vibrate for genuine emergencies. This pattern of alerts suggested something urgent. Roger, continue with the projected revenue increases, Isaiah said, rising from his chair. I need to step out for a moment. In the hallway, he pulled out his phone to find 17 text messages and 3 missed calls from Zoe. His stomach tightened as he opened the most recent message. Call me now. The girls were denied boarding. Racial profiling. We're still at the airport with security. Isaiah's heart pounded as he quickly dialed Zoe's number. She answered on the first ring. Isaiah, thank God. It's a mess here. What happened? He interrupted, already striding toward the elevator. The gate agents refused to accept the girls' IDs because they're too similar since they're identical twins. Called them suspicious, implied they were fake. They missed their flight, and now we're in a standoff with airport security and some condescending operations manager who keeps insisting it's not about race. Isaiah's hand tightened around the phone as Zoe continued. They're threatening to remove us from the terminal. I'm recording everything, but it's escalating, Isaiah. Where are you exactly? He asked, his voice deadly calm. Terminal B, main customer service counter near gate B15. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't let them go anywhere. Call Stewart if they try to detain you. Stuart Henderson was their family attorney, a partner at Zoe's firm. Isaiah ended the call and sent a quick text to his executive assistant, family emergency. Reschedule all meetings today. As the elevator descended, Isaiah opened his messages to see what else Zoe had sent. There were several video clips, the first showing Aaliyah attempting to explain to a gate agent that they were identical twins, the agent's skepticism evident in her body language. The second clip showed a male supervisor telling the girls they wouldn't be boarding. The third showed security approaching as the girls stood with their luggage and instrument cases, surrounded by curious onlookers. White-hot rage built in Isaiah's chest as he watched his daughters, his brilliant, talented, innocent daughters, being treated like criminals. In the last video, he could see the hurt and humiliation in Aaliyah's usually confident expression, the defensive anger in Amara's stance. He scrolled through his contacts as he reached the parking garage, finding William Anderson's direct number. Anderson was SkyRoute CEO, a man Isaiah had known for years through industry conferences and committees. They weren't friends, exactly, but they had a cordial professional relationship built on mutual respect. The call went straight to voicemail. "Will, it's Isaiah Reynolds. We have an urgent situation involving my family and your airline. Call me back immediately." Next, he tried SkyRoute's executive offices, only to be told by Anderson's assistant that he was in meetings all day and couldn't be disturbed. "This is Isaiah Reynolds, CEO of Jetstream Airways," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a courtesy call. "Tell him this is about a serious discriminatory incident involving my family at his airline, and I expect a call back within the hour." I'll pass along the message, Mr. Reynolds," the assistant stammered. "But Mr. Anderson's calendar is completely blocked until tomorrow morning." "Then unblock it," Isaiah said before hanging up. As he drove through downtown Atlanta toward the airport, Isaiah's phone continued to buzz with updates from Zoe. The situation wasn't improving. The operations manager had called additional security and was threatening to have them escorted from the premises if they continued to cause a disturbance. Meanwhile, a crowd had gathered, with several passengers voicing support for the family and sharing their own stories of being profiled by the airline. At a stoplight, Isaiah quickly searched for news about SkyRoute and discrimination. What he found confirmed his suspicions: this wasn't an isolated incident. Over the past 3 years, SkyRoute had faced multiple complaints about racial profiling of passengers, with several pending lawsuits. The pattern was clear, though the airline had managed to keep most cases out of the mainstream media through settlements with confidentiality clauses. One case had broken through, however. 6 months ago, a black physician had been removed from a SkyRoute flight when a flight attendant didn't believe she was qualified to assist with a medical emergency. The doctor had credentials and ID, but was still escorted off the plane. The incident had generated backlash on social media, with SkyRoute issuing a tepid apology promising additional training. Training that had obviously failed, Isaiah thought bitterly. As he approached the airport, another text from Zoe appeared: "They're threatening to ban us from flying SkyRoute ever again. Manager called us disruptive influences to other passengers." With each passing minute, Isaiah's fury crystallized into something cold and precise. This wasn't just about his daughters anymore. This was about every person who had ever been singled out, questioned, or humiliated because of how they looked. As CEO of a major airline, he had power that most victims of discrimination did not, and he intended to use it. He pulled into the executive parking area of Hartsfield-Jackson, where Jetstream maintained offices and operations centers. Instead of heading directly to Terminal B, he took the elevator to Jetstream's Airport Command Center on the 4th floor. The command center was the nerve center of Jetstream's daily operations, a large room with wall-to-wall screens displaying every flight in their network, weather patterns, and key performance metrics. Controllers and dispatchers monitored systems and communicated with aircraft and ground crews across the country. "Mr. Reynolds," the shift supervisor said in surprise as Isaiah entered. "We weren't expecting you today." "Karen, I need to initiate Operation Crosswind," Isaiah said without preamble. Karen's eyes widened. Operation Crosswind was Jetstream's emergency protocol for systemic threats, used only 3 times in the company's history, and never during Isaiah's tenure as CEO. It gave him direct operational control over the entire airline, bypassing normal chains of command. "Sir, that requires board notification and..." I'm aware of the protocols, Isaiah interrupted. Send the notification. Authorization code Reynolds Alpha 973. Karen nodded and began typing commands into her terminal. System will require secondary authentication from another executive. Isaiah already had his phone out, calling his COO. Marcus, I'm initiating Crosswind. I need your authentication code immediately. He listened briefly. I'll explain everything later. For now, I need your code. After receiving the code and completing the authentication, Isaiah turned to the room of now silent controllers. I'm heading to Terminal B to deal with a situation involving my family. Keep Crosswind protocols active until my direct order to stand down. As he left the command center, his phone rang. Roger Williams, the CFO, he'd left mid-presentation. Isaiah, what the hell is going on? We just received Crosswind notifications. My daughters were racially profiled and denied boarding on SkyRoute, Isaiah explained, his voice clipped. Their CEO won't take my call. I'm handling it. A pause. Jesus. Are the girls okay? They will be. What do you need from the team? Isaiah stepped into the elevator. Be ready. When this hits the media, our response needs to be immediate and unequivocal. As he crossed the terminal connector toward Terminal B, Isaiah's resolve hardened with each step. The terminal was crowded with midday travelers, none aware that the CEO of one of America's largest airlines was moving among them, about to unleash an unprecedented response to his family's mistreatment. When he reached the customer service area, he immediately spotted the confrontation, a cluster of security officers surrounding Zoe and the twins, with a gray-haired man in a SkyRoute management uniform gesturing emphatically. A crowd of travelers had formed a loose circle around them, many recording with their phones. Isaiah straightened his tie and strode forward, every inch the executive accustomed to command. Zoe, he called out, his voice carrying across the space. The group turned, and he saw relief flood his daughters' faces. Dad! Amara called out. Isaiah reached his family, placing himself between them and the security officers. I'm Isaiah Reynolds, he said, his tone leaving no room for interruption. These are my daughters and my wife. What seems to be the problem here? The manager, Franklin, according to his name badge, adopted a placating expression. Mr. Reynolds, your family has been causing a disruption after missing their flight. We've been trying to resolve the situation. They didn't miss their flight, Isaiah corrected coldly. They were denied boarding after your staff questioned the validity of their identification because they're identical twins. Tell me, Mr. Franklin, does SkyRoute make a habit of accusing passengers of fraud based on their appearance? Franklin blinked, clearly recalibrating his approach. Sir, I assure you this has nothing to do with race. Isaiah finished. Then perhaps you can explain why my daughters were singled out while other passengers boarded without issue? Franklin glanced at the growing crowd of onlookers. Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private. No, Isaiah said firmly. Discrimination thrives in privacy. We'll address this right here. One of the security officers stepped forward. Sir, we need to de-escalate this situation. Isaiah fixed him with a steady gaze. I agree. The simplest way to do that is for Mr. Franklin to apologize to my daughters and book them on the next flight to New York, without fees, in first class, with appropriate compensation for their distress and missed rehearsal time. Franklin's expression hardened. That won't be possible. Your family has been disruptive, and we're within our rights to deny them service. I see, Isaiah said quietly. He turned to the crowd. My name is Isaiah Reynolds. I'm the CEO of Jetstream Airways. A murmur ran through the onlookers. Several pulled out their phones, recognizing the name. For those recording, please continue, Isaiah said. This is what institutional racism looks like in the airline industry. My daughters, honor students, musicians on their way to a national competition, were denied boarding because their identification was deemed suspicious. Their crime? Being identical twins who happened to be black. He turned back to Franklin, whose face had drained of color as he realized who he was dealing with. "Mr. Franklin, since your CEO won't take my calls, I'll send a message he can't ignore." Isaiah pulled out his phone and dialed the command center. "Karen, this is Reynolds. Implement Crosswind Phase 2. Ground all flights. Immediately." Franklin's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't be serious." Isaiah ended the call and looked the manager directly in the eyes. "Watch me." Around them, the departure boards began to update, flight after flight changing to "cancelled" in angry red letters. The terminal erupted in chaos as announcements began to play across the airport public address system. "Attention passengers, all Jetstream Airways flights have been temporarily suspended. Please stand by for further information." Isaiah's phone rang again, this time displaying William Anderson's name. "Now he calls," Isaiah muttered, declining the call. Franklin was ashen. "You've grounded your entire airline over this?" "No, Mr. Franklin," Isaiah replied. "I've grounded my entire airline over a pattern of discrimination that your company has failed to address. My daughters were simply the last straw." As terminal-wide confusion escalated and his phone exploded with calls from board members, executives, and media, Isaiah turned to his family. Aaliyah's eyes were wide with shock, while Amara looked at her father with newfound respect. Zoe's expression was complex, concern mixed with pride. "Dad," Aaliyah whispered. "What did you just do?" "What needed to be done," Isaiah replied, putting his arm around her shoulders. "No one treats my family this way. No one." His phone rang again, Marcus, his COO. This time, he answered. "Sir, the board wants an emergency meeting. You can't ground the entire airline fleet." Isaiah looked at his daughters' faces, at the lingering hurt and humiliation in their eyes, and made his decision. "Watch me," he replied, ending the call. The Jetstream company car screeched to a halt in the executive parking area of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Isaiah Reynolds exited the vehicle in one fluid motion, already dialing numbers on his phone as he strode toward Terminal B. His normally meticulous appearance was slightly disheveled, tie loosened, a fine sheen of sweat on his forehead from the Atlanta heat. "Marcus, I need you to implement the emergency protocols we discussed last quarter," Isaiah said into the phone, his voice leaving no room for debate. "Yes, all of them. Authorization code Reynolds Delta 729. Marcus Thornton, Jetstream's chief operations officer and Isaiah's right-hand man for the past 5 years, hesitated on the other end of the line. "Isaiah, this is unprecedented. The board will." "The board doesn't run day-to-day operations, Marcus. I do. And right now, I'm telling you to initiate Operation Crosswind. Full spectrum." Operation Crosswind was Jetstream's classified emergency protocol, designed for scenarios ranging from terrorist threats to natural disasters that might require immediate grounding of the entire fleet. It had never been deployed for a situation like this. "Consider it done," Marcus finally replied. "But the financial implications will be my responsibility," Isaiah finished. "Get it done. Now." As he ended the call, Isaiah was already dialing Sharon Blackwell, Jetstream's chief legal officer. "Sharon, I need you to prepare for significant media coverage and potential legal action. My family has experienced racial discrimination at the hands of SkyRoute Airlines, and I'm about to take decisive action." He quickly outlined the situation with his daughters, his voice growing tighter as he described their humiliation. "Isaiah," Sharon said carefully, "while I understand your anger as a father, as your CLO, I have to caution you about using Jetstream resources for a personal matter. This stopped being just personal the moment I discovered SkyRoute has a pattern of these incidents," Isaiah countered. "This is about industry accountability. Have a statement ready within the hour." By the time Isaiah reached Terminal B, his phone was buzzing constantly with calls from board members, executives, and media outlets who had somehow already caught wind that something unprecedented was happening at Jetstream Airways. He could hear the chaos before he saw it: raised voices, confused announcements over the PA system, the collective distress of thousands of travelers suddenly finding their plans derailed. The departures board told the story, flight after flight labeled "cancelled" in angry red letters. Isaiah spotted his family immediately, Zoe standing protectively between their daughters and a group of security officers, her attorney posture in full effect. Amara was filming the confrontation on her phone while Aaliyah clutched her cello case, her expression a mixture of anxiety and anger. A circle of onlookers had formed around them, many with phones raised to capture the confrontation. Good, Isaiah thought. Let there be witnesses. Zoe, he called out, his voice cutting through the noise. Relief washed over his wife's face as she turned. Isaiah, thank God. He reached his family and immediately assessed the situation. 5 airport security officers formed a loose semicircle around them, while a gray-haired man in a SkyRoute management uniform was mid-sentence, finger pointing accusatorily at Zoe. Cannot have this kind of disruption in our terminal. If you continue, we'll have no choice but to. To what, exactly? Isaiah interrupted, stepping between the man and his family. The manager turned, irritation flashing across his features before registering Isaiah's tailored suit and commanding presence. Sir, this doesn't concern. I'm Isaiah Reynolds, he said, his voice level but carrying the unmistakable weight of authority. These are my daughters, who were denied boarding on your airline despite having valid identification and tickets. And you are. The man straightened, adjusting his posture. Gregory Franklin, operations manager for SkyRoute Airlines at Hartsfield-Jackson. Well, Mr. Franklin, it seems we have a situation that requires immediate resolution, Isaiah said. My daughters were racially profiled by your staff, accused of presenting fraudulent identification because they're identical twins, and denied boarding on a flight to a music competition that could determine their academic futures. Franklin's expression shifted subtly, the first flicker of recognition at Isaiah's name, followed quickly by professionally manufactured concern. Mr. Reynolds, I understand you're upset, but I assure you race had nothing to do with this. Our agents are trained to verify identification carefully for all passengers. Is that so? Isaiah asked, his tone deceptively mild. Then perhaps you can explain why my daughters were singled out when other passengers boarded without issue? Or why, when they presented multiple forms of identification, they were still accused of fraud? Franklin glanced nervously at the growing crowd of onlookers, many now whispering as they recognized Isaiah from business news coverage. Sir, perhaps we should continue this discussion in a private office. No, Isaiah said firmly. Discrimination thrives in privacy, Mr. Franklin. We'll address this right here, where everyone can witness how SkyRoute handles these situations. One of the security officers stepped forward, hand resting casually on his taser. Sir, we need everyone to remain calm and... I'm perfectly calm, Isaiah interrupted. Are you suggesting that a father advocating for his children is a threat requiring armed response? The officer hesitated, suddenly aware of how the scene might appear to the dozens of recording smartphones. Isaiah turned back to Franklin. I've attempted to reach your CEO, William Anderson, multiple times this morning. His office informed me he's unavailable until tomorrow. That's unacceptable. Franklin's professional veneer cracked slightly. Mr. Reynolds, with all due respect, even if you are who you claim to be, our CEO doesn't take calls on demand, even from competitors. A cold smile crossed Isaiah's face. Then perhaps he'll pay attention to this. Isaiah pulled out his phone and dialed Jetstream's operations center. This is Reynolds. Confirm status of Operation Crosswind. Crosswind is active, sir, came the immediate response. All flights grounded as ordered. Passengers being notified. Media queries already coming in. Maintain status until further notice, Isaiah instructed before ending the call. The effect on Franklin was immediate, his face paled as he glanced at the departure boards throughout the terminal, where Jetstream flights were all showing as cancelled. You can't possibly have grounded your entire airline over this, Franklin stammered. I just did, Isaiah replied. And until SkyRoute addresses this situation appropriately, those planes stay on the ground. By now, the crowd had grown substantially, with travelers recording and live-streaming the confrontation. The noise in the terminal had risen as Jetstream passengers began to react to the cancellations. Franklin's phone rang, and he answered it with visible relief. Yes, sir. Yes, he's here now. I'll tell him. He ended the call and turned back to Isaiah with forced composure. Mr. Reynolds, Mr. Anderson would like to speak with you immediately. He's on his way to the airport now. How convenient, Isaiah remarked. 20 minutes ago he couldn't be disturbed. Zoe stepped forward, placing a hand on Isaiah's arm. What exactly did you do? She asked quietly. I got their attention, he replied. No one treats our children this way. The twins exchanged glances, a mixture of awe and concern on their faces. Amara, ever the more outspoken one, asked, Dad, won't you get in trouble for this? What about all those passengers? Isaiah looked at his daughter, seeing not just the indignation of youth but the genuine concern for others that he and Zoe had tried to instill in both girls. Sometimes, he said gently, you have to create a problem big enough that it can't be ignored. Every passenger affected today will receive full compensation and rebooking assistance. But more importantly, they'll understand why this happened, because an airline decided that two young black women with valid ID looked suspicious. A SkyRoute supervisor rushed up to Franklin, whispering urgently in his ear. Franklin's expression grew increasingly alarmed. Sir, he said, addressing Isaiah with newfound deference, we'd like to offer your daughter's immediate rebooking on our next flight to New York, departing in 1 hour. First class, of course, with our sincere apologies for the misunderstanding. Isaiah's expression hardened. Misunderstanding? Is that what we're calling racial profiling now? I didn't mean to imply. Let me be very clear, Mr. Franklin, Isaiah interrupted. This isn't about getting my daughters on a flight anymore. This is about accountability for a pattern of discriminatory behavior that SkyRoute has failed to address despite multiple incidents. He turned to his family. We're going to the Jetstream lounge to regroup. Mr. Franklin, you can inform your CEO that I'll meet with him there, and only there. As they walked away, leaving Franklin sputtering behind them, security officers uncertain whether to follow, Aaliyah tugged at her father's sleeve. Dad, she whispered, did you really ground an entire airline because of us? Isaiah looked at his daughter, his brilliant, talented daughter who had been made to feel less than, who had been forced to defend her very identity. No, he said softly. I grounded an entire airline because no one should experience what you did today. Not you, not anyone's children. In the Jetstream executive lounge, the family settled into the private conference room as Isaiah fielded calls from increasingly anxious board members. Yes, Charles, I understand the financial implications, he said to the board chairman. But I also understand the moral implications of remaining silent while our competitors perpetuate discriminatory practices. He listened briefly before continuing. This isn't just about my daughters. This is about using our position in the industry to demand accountability. How many passengers without a direct line to a CEO have suffered similar treatment? After ending the call, Isaiah joined his family at the conference table. The board is divided, he explained. Half think I've lost my mind, the other half support taking a stand. Either way, I'm prepared for the consequences. Zoe, who had been reviewing the videos Amara had recorded, looked up with professional assessment. From a legal standpoint, we have a solid discrimination case. But from a personal standpoint. Her voice softened. I'm proud of you, Isaiah. This is why I fell in love with you, your willingness to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. The twins exchanged glances, their silent twin communication in full effect. What happens now? Aaliyah asked. Now, Isaiah said, checking his watch, we wait for William Anderson to realize that this isn't going away with a first-class upgrade and an insincere apology. He didn't have to wait long. Within 20 minutes, the lounge attendant announced that William Anderson, CEO of SkyRoute Airlines, was requesting entrance. Send him in, Isaiah instructed. Anderson entered alone, a calculated move, Isaiah recognized. No entourage, no lawyers, just CEO to CEO. Isaiah, Anderson began, extending his hand. This has escalated unnecessarily. Isaiah didn't accept the handshake. Has it, Will? Or has it escalated exactly as needed to address an issue your airline has repeatedly swept under the rug? Anderson's smile faltered. If there was a misunderstanding with your daughter's identification. There was no misunderstanding, Zoe interrupted. Your staff saw two young black women with similar appearances and immediately assumed fraud, despite multiple forms of valid ID. We have it all on video, including comments from your gate agent that were clearly discriminatory. Anderson glanced at the twins, then back to Isaiah. Look, I'm sorry your daughters had an unpleasant experience. We can certainly provide compensation, upgrade them to first class for their rebooked flight. You still don't get it, Isaiah said, his voice dangerously quiet. This isn't about compensation or upgrades. This is about a pattern of behavior that SkyRoute has failed to address despite multiple similar incidents over the past 3 years. Anderson's expression shifted from conciliatory to defensive. If you're referring to the incident with Dr. Simmons last year, that situation was entirely different and was resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Was it? Isaiah challenged. Or did you just pay her enough to go away quietly? How many NDAs has SkyRoute issued to cover up discriminatory incidents, Will? The color drained from Anderson's face. That's confidential corporate information. Not for long, Isaiah replied. Not with the media attention this is already generating. #Jetstream standstill is trending on Twitter, and people are asking why. When they find out it's because the CEO grounded his entire fleet to protest racial discrimination at a competitor airline, what do you think happens to SkyRoute's reputation? Anderson's professional composure cracked. This is corporate sabotage. You're using your position to attack a competitor over a personal grievance. No, Isaiah countered. I'm using my position to demand accountability for an industry-wide problem that you and others have ignored for too long. And it stops today. He slid a tablet across the table, displaying a document. These are my conditions for restoring Jetstream operations. Anderson scanned the document, his expression shifting from disbelief to anger. This is outrageous. You want us to implement new anti-bias training programs, create an independent oversight committee for passenger complaints, publicly acknowledge past incidents, and offer reparations to affected passengers. Plus a public apology to my daughters, Isaiah added calmly. Not from some PR flack, but from you personally. I could sue you for this, Anderson threatened. The board will have your head. Isaiah leaned forward. Sue me. Fire me. It doesn't matter. What matters is that two brilliant young women were humiliated today because of the color of their skin, and no one, not the gate agents, not the supervisors, not even the operations manager, thought that was a problem worth addressing until it cost them millions of dollars. He stood, towering over the table. So yes, Will, I grounded an entire airline. And I'd do it again tomorrow. The question is, how long are you willing to let your airline stay grounded by association? Because until you sign that document, every connecting SkyRoute passenger who was supposed to fly onward with Jetstream is stranded. Anderson stared at the document, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. I need to consult with our legal team. You have 1 hour, Isaiah replied. After that, I release a full statement to the media detailing exactly why Jetstream Airways has taken this unprecedented action. As Anderson left, Amara looked at her father with new understanding. You're really not backing down, are you? No, Isaiah said simply. Some things are more important than business as usual. Sometimes you have to use your power for something bigger than yourself. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, board emergency meeting called. They want you there in person in 30 minutes. Isaiah showed the message to Zoe, who nodded resolutely. Go, she said. We'll be fine here. This might cost me my job, he warned her quietly. Zoe smiled, the determined expression he'd fallen in love with decades ago. Some things are worth the cost. Isaiah nodded, then turned to his daughters. I need to face the board. Whatever happens next, remember this, your dignity is never negotiable. Not for convenience, not for business, not for anything. As he prepared to leave for the meeting that might end his career, Isaiah felt lighter than he had in years. For once, the weight of his position had become a tool for justice rather than a burden of responsibility. He straightened his tie, kissed each of his daughters on the forehead, and headed out to face whatever consequences awaited, knowing that regardless of the outcome, he had finally used his power for its highest purpose. The scene at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport resembled organized chaos. Terminal B's concourse was packed with stranded passengers, many crowded around gate agents' desks demanding answers. Digital displays throughout the airport continued to show row after row of canceled Jetstream flights, creating a ripple effect that was quickly spreading to other airlines. Inside the Jetstream Airways Executive Lounge, Zoe Reynolds paced the length of the private conference room, her courtroom heels clicking rhythmically against the polished floor. The twins sat side by side on a plush leather sofa, Amara scrolling through social media on her phone while Aaliyah stared contemplatively out the window at grounded Jetstream planes. It's everywhere, Amara announced, turning her phone to show her mother and sister. #Jetstream standstill is the #1 trending topic nationally. People are going crazy trying to figure out why an entire airline suddenly grounded all flights. Zoe paused her pacing to glance at the screen. The speculation online ranged from technical malfunctions to terrorist threats, with only a few early reports hinting at the truth, that the CEO had taken the unprecedented action in response to discrimination against his family. Dad's going to be in so much trouble, Aaliyah said quietly, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. He could lose everything because of us. Not because of you, Zoe corrected firmly. Because of SkyRoute's actions and his choice to respond to them. Never blame yourself for standing up against injustice. Amara continued scrolling through her phone. People are starting to figure it out. Someone posted a video from the terminal with the caption, Jetstream CEO just grounded entire airline after his daughters were racially profiled by SkyRoute. It already has 50,000 views. The lounge attendant knocked softly before entering. Mrs. Reynolds, there are several news crews in the main terminal requesting statements. Security is keeping them at bay for now, but they're quite persistent. Thank you, Caroline, Zoe replied. Please continue to decline all requests. Any word from my husband? Mr. Reynolds is still in the emergency board meeting, ma'am. He asked that you not worry. After the attendant left, Zoe checked her own phone to find 12 missed calls from partners at her law firm. News traveled fast in Atlanta's business community, and the firm was undoubtedly concerned about the implications of their named partner being at the center of a potential corporate crisis. Meanwhile, across the airport in Jetstream's executive offices, Isaiah Reynolds faced the company's board of directors. The large conference room was tense, with 14 board members, some physically present, others joining via video conference, sitting in stunned silence as Isaiah finished explaining his actions. Charles Whitfield, the 72-year-old board chairman, removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. Let me make sure I understand correctly, Isaiah. You initiated emergency protocol Operation Crosswind, grounding our entire fleet of 117 aircraft across 49 cities, affecting approximately 37,000 passengers so far, because your daughters were denied boarding on a competitor's flight. Because my daughters were racially profiled and discriminated against, Isaiah corrected, his voice steady. And because when I attempted to address this through proper channels, by contacting SkyRoute CEO directly, I was stonewalled. "This is going to cost us millions," interjected Rebecca Chen, the board's financial expert. "The compensation requirements alone for stranded passengers will be astronomical, not to mention the reputation damage." Isaiah nodded. "I'm fully aware of the financial implications. I'm also aware of the moral implications of remaining silent while a competitor airline engages in discriminatory practices with impunity." James Douglas, one of the younger board members, leaned forward. "While I sympathize with the situation, using company resources to address a personal grievance crosses an ethical line, Isaiah. The shareholders entrusted me with this company because of my judgment," Isaiah interrupted. "My judgment tells me that taking a stand against discrimination isn't just morally right, it's good business. Passengers choose airlines based on trust. What happens when the public learns that Jetstream's CEO was willing to ground an entire fleet rather than remain silent about racial profiling? They'll know exactly what we stand for." The boardroom erupted in overlapping voices, some supporting Isaiah's position, others calling for his immediate removal. Charles Whitfield banged his gavel for order. "The question before this board," Whitfield said once the room had quieted, "is whether to reverse the grounding order immediately and whether Isaiah's actions constitute grounds for termination. If you reverse my order without securing concrete changes from SkyRoute, you'll be sending a message that profit matters more than people," Isaiah warned. "As for my termination, that's your prerogative. But consider how it will look if you fire your black CEO for taking a stand against racial discrimination." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Back in the executive lounge, the twins were watching the situation unfold on television. Every major news network had picked up the story, with aviation correspondents stationed at airports across the country reporting on the unprecedented airline shutdown. Sources close to the situation tell CNN that Jetstream Airways CEO Isaiah Reynolds ordered the grounding after his teenage daughters were allegedly denied boarding on a SkyRoute Airlines flight due to racial profiling, a correspondent reported live from Chicago O'Hare. Jetstream's board is currently in emergency session, while SkyRoute Airlines has issued a statement calling the accusations baseless, and the response a disproportionate competitive attack. The lounge door opened, and William Anderson re-entered, this time accompanied by a woman in a sharp suit whom Zoe recognized as SkyRoute's chief legal officer. "Mrs. Reynolds," Anderson began, his tone markedly more respectful than earlier, "I've reviewed the situation with our legal team, and we'd like to propose an alternative resolution." Zoe straightened, lawyer mode fully engaged. "My husband made his requirements clear. We're prepared to issue a public apology to your daughters and implement additional training for our staff," Anderson offered. "But the demands for an independent oversight committee and public disclosure of past incidents are simply not feasible from a legal standpoint." "Not feasible," Zoe repeated coldly, "or not desirable. Because I can think of at least 7 discrimination cases against SkyRoute in the past 2 years that were quietly settled. How many more would an independent review uncover?" The legal officer stepped forward. "Mrs. Reynolds, as one attorney to another, I'm sure you understand the liability implications of such disclosures." "As one attorney to another," Zoe countered, "I'm sure you understand the liability implications of having this entire incident play out in the court of public opinion, with video evidence already circulating online." Anderson's phone buzzed, and his face paled as he read the message. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, stepping outside. Amara turned to her mother once the SkyRoute executives had left. "They're scared, aren't they?" "They should be," Zoe replied. "Your father just changed the game." In the executive offices, the Jetstream board remained deadlocked. Half supported Isaiah's stance on moral grounds, while the other half considered it an abuse of power deserving of termination. "Before we vote," Isaiah said, "I'd like to share something with you." He played a video compilation on the room's main screen, clips from various incidents over the past several years showing passengers of color being removed from flights, questioned at gates, or subjected to additional screening across multiple airlines. The final clip showed Amara and Aaliyah trying to explain to the SkyRoute gate agent that they were identical twins, only to be dismissed and accused of presenting fraudulent identification. "This isn't an isolated incident," Isaiah said quietly as the video ended. "This is a systemic problem across our industry that no one has had the courage to address. Until today." Charles Whitfield cleared his throat. "Isaiah, step outside for a moment while we deliberate." In the hallway, Isaiah checked his phone to find dozens of missed calls and hundreds of text messages. Among them was an update from Sharon Blackwell, Jetstream's chief legal officer: "Media requests overwhelming. Passenger reaction mixed but trending positive. Competing airlines offering support for stranded passengers but privately expressing concern about precedent." Another message, this one from Marcus Thornton: "Operations ready to resume on your command. Crew morale surprisingly high, many expressing pride in company's stance." Most surprising was a message from Tyler Jenkins, Jetstream's most senior pilot and head of the pilots union: "The pilots stand with you, Isaiah. Some things are worth grounding for." Isaiah was reading this last message when Charles Whitfield opened the boardroom door. "We've reached a decision." Meanwhile, the twins had been invited by the Young Artists of America competition organizers to perform their audition via video conference the following day, a special accommodation made after news of the incident spread through the classical music community. "See?" Amara said, showing the email to her sister. "We'll still get our chance." Aaliyah nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "But what about Dad? What if he loses everything because of us?" "He won't," Zoe assured her, though uncertainty edged her voice. "Your father knows exactly what he's doing." The lounge television continued to broadcast updates, with a CNN cheer-in now reading: "Airline showdown, Jetstream CEO grounds fleet in protest of alleged racial profiling at competitor airline." A financial analyst on screen was discussing the economic impact: "We're looking at potential losses in the tens of millions for Jetstream, not to mention the ripple effect on connecting flights and partner airlines. This kind of operational decision is unprecedented in the industry." The door opened again, and Isaiah entered, his expression unreadable. The family rose as one, tension evident in their postures. "Well?" Zoe asked. Isaiah's serious expression held for a moment longer before breaking into a small smile. "I'm still CEO. For now." Relief washed over the room as he continued: "The board has conditionally supported my decision, pending resolution within 24 hours. They've authorized me to negotiate directly with SkyRoute to resolve the situation." He turned to the twins. "More importantly, the organizers of your competition have agreed to a special performance slot tomorrow evening if we can get you to New York by then." "We know," Amara said, holding up her phone. "They emailed us." Isaiah's phone rang, William Anderson again. He answered, putting the call on speaker. "Isaiah," Anderson's voice came through, tension evident despite his attempt at cordiality, "our legal team has reviewed your proposals and prepared a counterproposal. We'd like to discuss terms for resolving this situation immediately." "I'll meet you in the main conference room in 15 minutes, Isaiah replied before ending the call. He turned to his family. "This isn't over yet, but we've got their attention." "What happens now?" Aaliyah asked. Isaiah's expression hardened with determination. "Now we make sure this never happens to anyone else's daughters." As news helicopters circled overhead and social media exploded with commentary, the Reynolds family prepared for the next phase of a confrontation that had escalated from a denied boarding to an industry-wide reckoning. Beyond the airport's walls, a national conversation about race, power, and accountability was taking shape, sparked by two talented teenagers who simply wanted to board a plane with their violins and cellos. The aftermath was just beginning. The Jetstream Airways executive boardroom, typically a sanctuary of corporate decorum, had transformed into a battleground of competing interests. On one side sat Isaiah Reynolds and his executive team, on the other, William Anderson flanked by SkyRoute's chief legal officer and public relations director. The polished mahogany table between them might as well have been a demilitarized zone. "Let's be clear about what's happening here," Isaiah began, his voice measured but firm. "This isn't a negotiation between competitors. This is a reckoning for an industry that has allowed discriminatory practices to persist unchallenged for too long. Anderson shifted uncomfortably. Isaiah, while we acknowledge there may have been a misunderstanding with your daughters. Stop right there, Isaiah interrupted. What happened to my daughters wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the latest in a pattern of incidents that SkyRoute has systematically downplayed, settled quietly, or dismissed entirely. He slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was a meticulously organized spreadsheet documenting 27 discrimination complaints against SkyRoute over the past 3 years, complete with details that should have been confidential. Where did you get this information? Anderson demanded, his face paling. Does it matter? Isaiah countered. What matters is that each of these incidents represents a real person who was humiliated, dismissed, or demeaned because of how they looked. And in each case, SkyRoute's response was to offer compensation with confidentiality clauses rather than address the root problem. The SkyRoute legal officer leaned forward. Mr. Reynolds, I must caution you that if this information was obtained improperly. Sharon, Isaiah interrupted, nodding toward Jetstream's chief legal officer, has verified the legality of our evidence gathering. But again, you're focusing on the wrong issue. The problem isn't how we know about these incidents. The problem is that they happened at all. In the executive lounge, the Reynolds family watched a live news broadcast as commentators debated the unprecedented situation. What we're witnessing is either a remarkable act of corporate courage or an egregious abuse of power, said a silver-haired analyst on CNN. The question is whether Isaiah Reynolds is using his position appropriately to combat discrimination or weaponizing his company in a personal vendetta. A second analyst, a black woman with decades of experience in corporate governance, countered, when we talk about using privilege to be an ally, this is exactly what that looks like. Reynolds has power that most victims of discrimination don't have, and he's using it to force accountability. Amara turned to her mother. Do you think this will actually change anything? Zoe considered the question carefully. Change rarely comes without pressure, especially when it threatens established systems. Your father is applying pressure in a way no one can ignore. Back in the boardroom, negotiations had turned tense. These demands are simply not reasonable, Anderson insisted. An independent oversight committee with power to review passenger complaints. Public acknowledgement of past incidents. Training programs designed by external civil rights organizations. You're asking us to admit liability and invite lawsuits. Isaiah leaned back in his chair, unmoved. I'm asking you to do better. And I'm using the only leverage that seems to get through to corporations, financial consequence. The door opened, and Charles Whitfield, Jetstream's board chairman, entered unexpectedly. The room fell silent as the elderly man took a seat beside Isaiah. I've been listening to the broadcast coverage, Whitfield said, his distinguished voice carrying the weight of his 40 years in the industry. And I've been reading passenger reactions online. Mr. Anderson, I was initially opposed to Isaiah's actions today. I thought them impulsive and disproportionate. He paused, adjusting his glasses. But I've changed my mind. The stories emerging online, not just about your airline, but about all airlines including our own, reveal a problem that's been ignored for too long. So I'm here to inform you that the Jetstream board has voted to support Isaiah's position. Our planes remain grounded until meaningful change is promised and guaranteed. Anderson's expression hardened. This is corporate blackmail. No, Whitfield corrected. This is corporate accountability. There's a difference. In the hours that followed, the standoff captured America's attention. #Airline sit-in began trending alongside #Jetstream standstill as passengers at airports across the country shared their own experiences with discrimination. In the Jetstream lounge, the twins watched their social media accounts explode with messages of support from fellow musicians, classmates, and strangers who had faced similar treatment. Aaliyah, look at this, Amara said, showing her sister a message from the director of Juilliard's pre-college program. They want to offer us both audition slots next month, regardless of how the competition turns out. Aaliyah read the message, her eyes widening. Is this happening because of Dad? Because of the publicity? Does it matter? Amara asked. We've worked for this our whole lives. It does matter, Aaliyah insisted. I want to be judged on my music, not because my father grounded an airline for us. Zoe overheard the exchange and sat between her daughters. Life isn't always fair about how opportunities come our way. What matters is what we do with them. As evening fell, Isaiah returned to the lounge, exhaustion evident in the lines of his face but determination still burning in his eyes. Anderson's agreed to most of our terms, he announced. SkyRoute will implement a comprehensive anti-bias training program, establish an independent review process for discrimination complaints, and make a public apology to you both. What about the other incidents? Zoe asked. That was the sticking point, Isaiah admitted. Their legal team was adamant about not acknowledging past cases. But we compromised. They'll establish a confidential review process for past complainants to have their cases reconsidered without the NDA constraints. So we won? Amara asked. Isaiah's expression was complex. We made progress. Real change takes time, but this is a start. His phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. SkyRoute stock down 7% in after-hours trading. Our passengers showing overwhelming support online. Board wants public statement within the hour. What happens now? Aaliyah asked. Now, Isaiah said, we try to get you to New York for that competition. I've arranged for the Jetstream corporate jet to take us tonight. Zoe raised an eyebrow. That's not exactly keeping a low profile. No, Isaiah agreed with a tired smile. But I've spent my career being careful, measured, strategic. Today taught me sometimes you need to make a statement. Meanwhile, in airports across the country, Jetstream employees were showing unexpected solidarity. Gate agents wore black armbands in silent support. Pilots and flight attendants shared social media posts with the hashtag #IStandWithReynolds. The company's internal communication channels filled with messages from staff sharing their own experiences with racism and discrimination both as employees and passengers. As news of the settlement spread, Jetstream's command center prepared to resume operations. The first flights to be restored would be those carrying connecting SkyRoute passengers, a deliberate choice that Isaiah had insisted upon as a show of good faith. That evening, a joint press conference was held in the international terminal. William Anderson, visibly uncomfortable but professionally composed, delivered the agreed-upon statement. SkyRoute Airlines acknowledges that incidents occurred which did not reflect our commitment to equal treatment of all passengers. We apologize specifically to Amara and Aaliyah Reynolds for their experience this morning, and we commit to implementing comprehensive changes to ensure such incidents do not recur. Isaiah followed with his own statement. Jetstream Airways will resume normal operations beginning at 8 p.m. tonight. We took this extraordinary action not out of corporate rivalry but out of a belief that our industry must do better. To our passengers affected by today's disruption, we offer our sincere apologies and full compensation. Sometimes standing up for what's right requires sacrifice from everyone. As reporters shouted questions, Isaiah held up a hand. The most important thing I did today wasn't as a CEO, but as a father. I showed my daughters that their dignity is never negotiable, and that sometimes you must use whatever power you have to stand up against injustice, not just for yourself, but for everyone who doesn't have the same platform. Later that night, as the Reynolds family boarded the corporate jet bound for New York, Isaiah received a message from Whitfield, emergency board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. Your presence required. Consequences will be discussed. Are you going to lose your job? Aaliyah asked quietly when she saw her father's expression change. Isaiah put his arm around her shoulders. Maybe. But some things are worth more than a job title. Like what? She pressed. He looked at his daughters, brilliant, talented young women who would soon make their own way in an imperfect world. Like knowing that when it mattered most, I didn't stay silent. Like showing you both that sometimes, you have to be willing to risk everything for what's right. As the jet lifted into the night sky, Isaiah knew tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The board might indeed remove him. Shareholders might sue. His career might never recover. But watching his daughters whisper together about their upcoming performance, seeing the pride in Zoe's eyes as she looked at him across the aisle, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years of corporate climbing, the absolute certainty that he had done the right thing, regardless of the cost. The reckoning had only just begun, not just for SkyRoute, but for an entire industry that would now face unprecedented scrutiny. Whatever came next, Isaiah Reynolds had changed the conversation forever. 3 months after what the media had dubbed the Jetstream standoff, Isaiah Reynolds stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, watching planes take off and land at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. The view was the same as it had been for years, but everything else had changed. The silver nameplate on his desk still read Isaiah Reynolds, Chief Executive Officer, but the addition of Executive Oversight Committee approved engraved beneath it served as a daily reminder of the compromise that had kept him in his position. The board had ultimately decided against termination, partly due to public pressure, partly due to employee solidarity, and partly due to the uncomfortable truth that Isaiah's stand had resonated with millions. The terms of his continued leadership included the formation of a special committee to review any non-standard operational decisions, corporate speak for ensuring he couldn't ground the fleet again without approval. Isaiah had accepted the oversight without complaint. He'd made his point. A gentle knock on the door drew his attention as his assistant entered. "Sir, your wife is on line 1. She says the girls just finished their dress rehearsal at Carnegie Hall." Isaiah smiled, genuine warmth replacing his contemplative expression. "Thank you, Darren." He picked up the phone. "How did it go?" Zoe's voice came through, vibrant with pride. "They were magnificent. The acoustics in that hall make their duet sound like an entire orchestra. The director said they're the highlight of tomorrow's showcase." 3 months ago, after their delayed arrival in New York, Amara and Aaliyah had performed their competition piece via video conference for the judges of the Young Artists of America. Despite the unusual circumstances, or perhaps because of the focused intensity the ordeal had inspired, they had placed first in the strings category. The resulting media attention had caught the ear of a Carnegie Hall director, who had invited them to perform in a special showcase of young talent. It was an honor rarely extended to musicians their age. "I'll be on the evening flight," Isaiah assured Zoe. "Nothing will keep me from being there tomorrow." "The Oversight Committee approved?" Zoe asked, only half joking. Isaiah chuckled. "I'm taking personal time. Even they can't object to that." After ending the call, Isaiah turned his attention to the tablet on his desk displaying the day's industry news. The headline that had been dominating aviation coverage for the past week read, "SkyRoute Airlines announces major leadership changes amid restructuring." Following the incident with the Reynolds twins, SkyRoute had faced intense scrutiny from the media, passengers, and eventually shareholders. The promised anti-bias training and independent review process had been implemented, but they proved to be just the beginning of the company's transformation. William Anderson had resigned to pursue other opportunities, the corporate euphemism for being forced out. SkyRoute's board had replaced him with Vanessa Mitchell, a respected former federal judge with a background in civil rights law. Her appointment had sent shockwaves through the industry, signaling a genuine commitment to change rather than mere damage control. Isaiah scrolled through the article to a quote from Mitchell's first press conference, "My priority is building an airline where every passenger is treated with equal dignity and respect. The incidents that brought me to this position will not be forgotten but will instead serve as the foundation for a new corporate culture." The door opened again as Marcus Thornton, Jetstream COO and Isaiah's right-hand man, entered with a thick folder of reports. "The quarterly numbers are in," Marcus announced, taking a seat across from Isaiah. "Passenger volume is up 12% compared to last year. Customer satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. And employee retention has improved significantly." Isaiah raised an eyebrow. "All despite the millions we lost during the standoff." "Because of it, I'd argue," Marcus countered. The public response has been overwhelmingly positive. People are choosing Jetstream specifically because of the stand we took. The "Integrity in the Air" marketing campaign is resonating in ways our previous approaches never did. The campaign in question had been a bold move, leaning into the airline's new reputation for social responsibility rather than trying to distance itself from the controversy. Advertisements featured real Jetstream employees sharing personal stories about inclusion and respect, with the tagline, "Some principles are worth standing ground for." Isaiah nodded thoughtfully. "And the industry-wide changes?" Marcus handed him a report summary. The Reynolds Protocol has been formally adopted by 7 major carriers and 16 regional airlines. The Federal Aviation Administration is considering incorporating elements into their passenger rights regulations. It's becoming the standard faster than anyone predicted. The Reynolds Protocol had emerged from the settlement with SkyRoute, a standardized set of practices for ID verification and passenger treatment that eliminated subjective judgment in favor of clear, consistent procedures. What had begun as a corporate agreement had quickly spread throughout the industry as airlines recognized the need to address their own vulnerable practices. "And the discrimination complaints?" Isaiah asked. "Down 34% industry-wide in the last quarter. The independent review process is working." Isaiah allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. The personal cost had been high, weeks of media scrutiny, tense negotiations with the board, and the constant oversight of his decisions, but the results spoke for themselves. His phone buzzed with a text message from Aaliyah. "Dad, Juilliard wants us both for next fall. Full scholarships. We got the letters today." Pride swelled in his chest as he typed a reply, "Never doubted you for a moment. We'll celebrate tomorrow." The twins' performance at the competition had indeed caught Juilliard's attention, but it was their subsequent auditions that had secured their places. They had earned their success through talent and dedication, regardless of the unusual circumstances that had brought them into the spotlight. That evening, as Isaiah prepared to leave for his flight to New York, Sharon Blackwell, Jetstream's chief legal officer, stopped by his office. "You'll want to see this before you go," she said, handing him a legal document. SkyRoute just filed their quarterly SEC report. They've allocated $30 million for a passenger reconciliation fund. Isaiah scanned the document, understanding immediately what it meant. "They're settling with past victims of discrimination?" Sharon nodded. "Without NDAs. It goes beyond what we negotiated. Mitchell is serious about cleaning house." "Good," Isaiah said simply. "It's about time." As he gathered his belongings, Sharon hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth, Isaiah, what you did that day, it changed things. Not just for the industry, but for a lot of us personally. My daughter flies alone to visit her father twice a month, and every time she does, I worry about how she'll be treated. Maybe a little less now." The personal acknowledgement from his typically reserved colleague caught Isaiah off guard. "I just did what any parent would do." "No," Sharon countered. "You did what someone with power should do. There's a difference." On the flight to New York that evening, Isaiah found himself reflecting on the past 3 months. The corporate fallout had been significant but manageable. The personal impact had been more profound. His relationship with the twins had deepened. They saw their father not just as a successful executive but as someone willing to risk everything to stand up for them. For Amara, always the more outspoken of the two, it had reinforced her natural inclination toward advocacy. For Aaliyah, it had awakened a quiet confidence that had transformed her music. Zoe met him at LaGuardia, the terminal bustling with evening travelers. The girls wanted to come, but they're resting their fingers before tomorrow's performance, she explained as they walked to the parking garage. "How are they really doing?" Isaiah asked. "With all of this?" Zoe considered the question thoughtfully. "They're processing it in different ways. Amara's embraced the attention, she's already organizing a student advocacy group at school focused on discrimination in the arts. Aaliyah's more reflective. She told me yesterday that she finally understands why I became a civil rights attorney. Isaiah smiled at the thought of his daughters following their mother's path of advocacy, each in their own way. "And you?" Zoe asked. "Any regrets?" Isaiah thought about the oversight committee, the board tensions, the weeks of sleepless nights negotiating the company's future. "Not one," he said with absolute certainty. The next evening, Carnegie Hall's stern auditorium glowed with warm light as the young artists' showcase prepared to begin. Isaiah and Zoe sat in the front row, programs open to the page listing Amara and Aaliyah Reynolds performing their original composition, Inflection Point. As the twins walked onto the stage, Amara with her violin, Aaliyah with her cello, the audience applauded politely. Few knew the story behind their presence there, and the girls had insisted they wanted to be judged solely on their music. They began to play, and Isaiah felt his throat tighten with emotion. The piece they had composed captured their journey, beginning with harmony, descending into dissonance and conflict, then resolving into something new and more powerful. The technical skill was impressive, but it was the emotional resonance that held the audience spellbound. When they finished, the hall erupted in a standing ovation. Isaiah and Zoe rose with the crowd, pride radiating from them as their daughters took their bows. At the reception afterward, a distinguished older gentleman approached the family. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, extending his hand. "Martin Kessler, Dean of Juilliard. Your daughters are remarkable talents." "Thank you," Isaiah replied. "They've worked incredibly hard." "Yes, but talent and hard work aren't always enough in this world, are they?" Kessler observed. "Sometimes it takes someone willing to change the rules of the game." Before Isaiah could respond, Kessler continued, "What you did for your daughters, grounding an entire airline, it's become a case study in our ethics curriculum. The question of when power should be used to challenge systemic injustice." Isaiah glanced at his daughters, deep in conversation with other young musicians across the room. "And what conclusion do your students reach?" Kessler smiled. "That's the beauty of it, there's no easy answer. Some see it as an abuse of corporate power, others as a necessary disruption of an unjust status quo. But they all agree on one thing." "What's that?" "That the world changes when people with privilege and power choose to use it on behalf of those without." As the evening wound down, the family gathered in their hotel suite, still buzzing with the excitement of the performance. Aaliyah carefully placed her cello in its case while Amara scrolled through congratulatory messages on her phone. "Did you see this?" Amara asked, holding up her screen. SkyRoute just announced they're naming their new anti-discrimination training center after Congressman John Lewis. Isaiah nodded approvingly. Vanessa Mitchell making good on her promises. "Would any of this have happened without what you did, Dad?" Aaliyah asked quietly. Isaiah considered the question carefully. Change was overdue. It might have come eventually, but sometimes systems need a shock to transform. What matters is that it's happening now. Zoe, who had been on her own phone, looked up with a smile. "Speaking of transformation, you'll never guess what just came across my news alerts. Our former SkyRoute gate manager, Gregory Franklin. He's been reassigned to undergo the company's new anti-bias training program, as a student, not an instructor." The family shared a moment of vindication at the news. "There's something else," Zoe added, her expression growing more serious. "Remember the pilot who spoke up for you at the gate that day? He's filed a whistleblower complaint alleging systemic discrimination in SkyRoute's hiring and promotion practices. My firm's been asked to represent him." Isaiah raised an eyebrow. "Will you take the case?" "I already did," Zoe confirmed. "Some battles are worth fighting, even when they're difficult." As the twins prepared for bed, Isaiah stood on the hotel balcony overlooking the New York skyline, reflecting on the unexpected journey of the past 3 months. What had begun as a simple trip to a music competition had catalyzed an industry-wide reckoning with practices long overdue for change. Zoe joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Penny for your thoughts." "I was just thinking about power," Isaiah said. "All those years climbing the corporate ladder, I thought power was about controlling resources, making decisions that affected the bottom line. And now? Zoe prompted. Now I understand that real power is about when you choose to use it, and why. He squeezed her hand. I'm proud of our girls. Not just for their music, but for who they're becoming. Through the glass doors, they could see Amara and Aaliyah sitting on one of the beds, heads bent together over a new composition they were discussing, their futures bright with possibility. They'll carry this forward in their own way, Zoe observed. That's the real legacy. Isaiah nodded, knowing that beyond the policy changes and corporate reforms, the most significant outcome of the past 3 months was what his daughters had learned about standing up for what's right, a lesson worth more than any title or position he could ever hold. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination? Would you have the courage to stand up like Isaiah did? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful stories about standing up against injustice. Remember, change happens when those with power choose to use it for good. Thank you for watching, and may you always find the strength to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Isaiah Reynolds' story teaches us that true power lies not in titles or positions, but in how we choose to use our influence when injustice occurs. In a world where discrimination persists despite laws against it, sometimes extraordinary measures are needed to create meaningful change. The Reynolds family demonstrated that confronting racism requires courage at all levels, from Aaliyah and Amara maintaining their dignity despite humiliation, to Zoe leveraging her legal expertise, to Isaiah using his corporate authority to force accountability. The incident highlights how privilege and power can be redirected toward justice. While most victims of discrimination lack access to the levers of corporate influence, those who possess such power have a responsibility to use it. The Reynolds Protocol became more than just company policy, it sparked an industry-wide reckoning that benefited countless travelers. Perhaps most importantly, this story reminds us that our children are watching how we respond to injustice. By refusing to accept discrimination against his daughters, Isaiah taught them that their dignity is non-negotiable, a lesson more valuable than any executive title or corporate success. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination at an airport, restaurant, or store? Would you have the courage to speak up? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story about standing against racism resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of resilience and justice. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful statement we can make is simply refusing to accept the unacceptable.